Yeah, I think so. All right. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Tuve,
Here.
Commissioner Alvarez,
Here.
Commissioner J. Here. Commissioner Proskowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Carpenter,
Here.
Commissioner Cohen. Here. And Chair Chappelle is excused. And Council Liaison Kathy Martin Willis is on via Zoom.
All right, well, hello, Kathy. I should have said it's what date is it, to July 7th. I reviewed the minutes. I assume everybody got at least the digital copy.
I did not mail a packet somehow to you guys, so I did email, and hopefully people saw the digital copy. I apologize for not mailing a copy last week. It was crazy, right?
All good. I read through it. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, okay. I would entertain motion, and it was minutes for April meeting as well.
May and June.
Or May and June, yeah, that's right. So I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the May.
Second.
All those in favor, let's signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes are approved.
Did you just do May or did you do May?
We do both.
You could do the month and you said May and June.
Yeah,
No.
we're efficient tonight. New sheriff in town. Just met this one, the next. We do not have any visitor public comments, I assume. Okay, nothing emailed in, so start the staff report, start rolling through some new business.
Okay, so the new business is a public hearing, you have a script in front of you.
Somewhere.
Oh, shoot, it's right here.
I was told I had it in front of me, in fact, I did not.
I don't have it in front of me.
Alright, sounds good. Alright. Can we just roll through this?
Yep.
Alright, this evening, the planning commission will hold a public hearing on legislative amendment LA-2025-03, a code change to require a pre-application conference for most development activities. The planning commission will make a recommendation to the city council based on the complete record, including the testimony received following tonight's public hearing. These proceedings will be recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and state of Oregon. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. At the beginning of the public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria from the city's comprehensive plan and or the state of Oregon's statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, we are asking you to use the speaker cards that are provided. When called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the chair and you must state your name and address for the public record. Before we begin, does any commissioner wish to declare an actual or a potential conflict of interest in this matter? All right. Well, I will now open the public hearing for LA-2025-03. And may we please have a staff report.
Perfect, yes, hi there, everybody, Fred Evander, city planner here, so this change is relatively simple change, we talked about it a couple of months ago, it would require a pre-application for most development activities within the community. The reason for this is specifically because we frequently have people get into a project, think that they've got a relatively simple project, and then all of a sudden find out about more requirements than may be necessary. Now, last time I was with you folks, you said, hey, perhaps tell us some examples of that. I won't give you exact lots or anything to protect the property owners and everything like that, but I wrote down a couple. So some of the benefits where we have done pre-apps, we've had development projects come in, we had a coffee drive-through come in, and we brought them in. It would have been a very simple project, but the SVCs associated with that project were so high because the trip generation rates associated with drive-through facility for a coffee shop ended up putting that project very expensive. We gave them that exact number of just an estimate. They said there's no way we can do that. So that's sort of what we're doing with why pre-apps are beneficial. Another instance, we had A daycare facility, same sort of thing, daycare facility is something that we absolutely want in the community. They came in, they had a site that they were looking at. We gave them, again, the trip generation rates for a daycare facility, and all of a sudden that project was very expensive. They became aware of it, they walked away from the site. Ideally, that's what we want from these things. We want a pre-application up front. So we can essentially lay the costs on the table, and allow people to make an informed decision about whether to proceed with the project or not. Now, a couple of times when a pre-application was not given, was a person converted a commercial use to a house, right? Thought it was a very simple sort of approach of just moving from one land use to another, similar sort of impact. Well, in that process, was told that there was right of way improvements that were expected. That was an added cost, like once they were a ways into the project, right? Again, if a pre-application would have been required, we could have told them upfront, hey, you're gonna be looking at some right of way improvements that you may not expect. Also, another one was we had no pre-application for a project, relatively simple minor partition, dividing one lot into 2 lots. In that process, that person thought they had a simple project, ended up selling the rights, essentially getting into a contract for the second lot that would be created with a neighbor. And in the process, we told them, or we processed the application, said there are right of way improvements that are gonna be expected. That was a cost that he hadn't considered in the contract. And so then it's like having a scramble to try and figure out, what do I do with this project that's coming in? And my costs are now more than I anticipated. The reason that we think this change is beneficial is it essentially forces us to put all of our cards on the table right up front and say, this is the cost, these are the improvements that you're gonna be looking at. Another benefit of it is it will force all of us internally to give a coordinated response to an applicant. So with the project that was a partition, that person did talk to people individually in the city, but because they didn't, you know,
Did talk or did not?
did talk.
Did talk.
But if they're asking me questions about a partition, let's say, my answers are gonna be different than, say, Public Works and the improvements that are gonna be necessary. Sometimes the scope of our review is confined to our responsibilities, and we're not necessarily about, oh, what is Public Works gonna require for right of way, whatever it may be. So essentially, it's a chance for all of us and the applicant to get together and say, this is what we expect for this project. And I mean, another benefit is to write it down. So everybody knows it, including us, and we're not changing it in the future. Are we, you know what I'm saying? So that's essentially what we're hoping to achieve with this. It's a very simple change. You can see it on page 8 of your packet if you had packets. Myra, can you, or page 15, excuse me, page 15. You can see it's just a couple of paragraphs, essentially, with some bullet points, just explaining when a pre-application is and is not required. And so, yeah, basically that's what we're hoping to achieve with this code change. We did send this to the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We did publish a notice of associated with this. Basically, it's a fairly simple change. And we would recommend approval of it. Are there any questions that you have for me?
I've got one question just to start. Curious what other communities around here require pre-apps. I know Salem does. But if any, like, doesn't tell, I think the county does not actually. But does Dallas or Monmouth require pre-apps? Just curious. I know it doesn't really bear anything, but it's just like, it's not an atypical thing. I'm just curious if other folks around here know.
You know, I don't know for certain.
Okay.
I do know, I mean, I think I gave you guys the example of Lacey. The last time we talked about it.
Sure.
Lacey just had a day for pre-apps and they would just.
Yeah,
have
that's
to-
what Salem does. The other question I would have is around fee schedule
Yeah,
for that. And obviously it's not gonna necessarily, well, it doesn't live here,
yeah,
lives in the fee schedule somewhere else.
yeah,
We're not picking a fee, but we had talked earlier about what
Yeah.
that was gonna look like. I'd be curious if you could give us.
Clarification, are you talking about a fee for the meeting? Is there a cost for the
There's-
meeting?
Yeah, there is, yeah, so that's not outlined here.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I couldn't find it and it seemed like that should be part of it.
yeah. So, what? So. City council has responsibility for setting a fee schedule and what I was encouraged with this is to not sort of. Work our way into a fee.
Yeah.
With this. But to leave that to the purview of the city council.
Okay,
But can you put it in there at all, that a fee will, will be adjudged or will be
what's that?
assessed for?
I mean, we assume that a fee will be assessed,
But
definitely.
I'm with you,
Yeah.
there is nothing in all that I read, and I had the same question, because I knew we talked about fees, and there's no mention anywhere. And I think if we're trying to get people to come in early and you want them to know what's going on, we need to be upfront that there's a fee schedule
And
as well.
and it shouldn't be onerous, we're trying to help them and not burden things.
Yeah.
If it's $20 or $50, that's one thing, if it's $200 or $300 because of all the people that are involved, that becomes a whole different ballgame, I think.
I would, I think. To your point, my suggestion might be. Is something around like a fee sort of will be assessed, and reference someplace else. I don't wanna put in dollars.
Yeah.
I'm also, I know we're not trying to back into a fee.
Yeah.
This is, there is a lot of staff time involved. I will tell you the price for a Salem pre-app meeting is. High, like close to $900. And that's not what we're looking for, obviously, here. We had talked a number, I think, previously, but. It does seem that we should put. Something,
Yeah,
it doesn't commit us to anything, it just says that
yeah,
you
so.
will be sort of incurred.
So one
That's
thing that I will say is, I do think that we talk about fees in another section of the code, so I can look at that.
I think what you're probably hearing from us, and I don't know if you heard, Sally just said it, but. The transparency piece of this, though, it's not a surprise gotcha when I'm coming in for a pre-app. Oh, it didn't say anything about a cost associated to it.
Right, our application says a cost on it.
Okay.
So there is that, and
But that's,
On the application they would give for.
yeah, on the application.
that they get, so we do have a section that talks about fees, 10.080.080. And it lists a number of fees. It's interesting, it does not list pre-applications as having a fee, so. If a fee section were to be included, that's what I would just,
Reference that,
I would probably just put pre-application conference.
Yeah.
Within that list.
Yeah.
And then on the application that they would give for the pre-app process.
Yeah.
Would say upfront, there's a fee associated.
Yeah, that's
And
right,
we talked about, does that fee then go towards what they owe if they go ahead with the project?
right, and I think that's a great idea. Again, that's what I was encouraged was to leave that to the discretion of the city council. What I will say and what I told you folks last time is this will absolutely save staff time. So because I mean, I actually feel like this will be a positive step for use of staff time, rather than us reacting to either angry applicants or having to go out to a site, have conversations. This will absolutely be a better use of staff time, even though in a pre-application, there's a lot of staff costs associated with that.
Do you see this as, I'm making this up. We'll have these meetings back to back to back on the third Tuesday of each month or something like that, because this month has no apps. Next month there's 5, the next month there's 3,
What I think we'll see how it works. I think if we have a lot of them, I do think we'll probably do back to back to back.
Yeah.
We'll just sort of find a time and a day that works.
Because you've got to get a lot of people involved, you don't want to bring them in 15 times during a month.
Right, right now, we don't have a lot of applications right now, so we're able to schedule pre-applications pretty much on a as needed basis.
I was just gonna let you know, you'd asked about Dallas and Monmouth.
Yeah.
Dallas has a fee of $270 for pre-application conference, and Monmouth has $420
Okay.
for a pre-application conference, so yeah.
And I don't know if they do it for everything.
Those might not be required at the same kind of level that we're talking. I would, sorry, just to, let me, I'm very sensitive to not wading into the fee conversation, because that's not the purview, that's not what we're trying to do here, we're trying to do the code piece, so sorry to get bogged down.
Yeah, no,
And
that's
that, but
fine.
I do think it's important, I mean, those meetings are expensive in terms of staff time, but I do think it's probably the expectation setting makes it so that there's happier customers, happier citizens on the back end. And so I'm all in favor of that. Just not to, I probably shouldn't get quite as bogged down. Conversation, please.
Thank you. I was just gonna say, so you've provided some examples of when this would have been beneficial. Could you give like a ballpark figure of how much staff time was involved cumulatively to these examples that didn't have this procedure in place?
Well, that's so. For the ones that haven't had the procedure, we've had to, it's kind of like continuing, it's sort of like a trip on the project that you keep on having to sort of go back. So the right of way improvement. For the one that transitioned from a commercial to a residential house, that right of way improvement is not done to date. Staff are still monitoring that situation, even though basically in a whole lot of ways, the project is done, and so there was staff time associated with essentially writing letters and whatnot, everything like that, trying to get the person to comply, right? The partition example, there was a whole lot of time associated with and it actually went up the chain of command to try and see if there was various ways to get through the process without having to do any sort of right of way improvements that the person did not expect. And so there's a whole lot of time, and it's hard for me to quantify because in a lot of ways that wasn't my time. So I just know that it was like the city engineer's time, it was Kenneth's time. I think even Sean got pulled into it. So there's a whole bunch of other people that are then brought in and have their brought used as well. What we would much rather do is say, hey, this is our expectation for this project, you know. And give that to them, and if they can do it, great, if they can't, you know, they can walk away, if they can't do it, and if the expectation is clear, then. When somebody comes back in the future and says, hey, I didn't know that there was right of way improvement here. We can say, hey, you know what, we actually communicated it to you, and we have it in the pre-application notes that we gave you. You know, that's always nice to have that, like, written down, be able to say, yeah, no, we communicated that at the beginning.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, or is like, you know, having that ongoing communication even after it started, say, hey, you know. Call bind, right, they get a bind is that you've agreed to these.
Yeah.
To meet these steps, these parameters, so
Right,
there's no surprises.
right,
I mean, certainty is what we're aiming, trying to shoot for here on both parties.
right, that's,
Brad, I think this is gonna be really beneficial to the non-sophisticated people that come in here. If you've got a developer that's gonna put in 40 houses. They got professionals that are gonna be involved, but we got a homeowner that wants to
so
silver things. It's really gonna be helpful to them. So
that is, I mean, that is. Perfect, because I mean, you're exactly right, and it's sort of the irony about how the existing process works. We have the big projects coming in, we have them going through the pre-application, and again, some bigger projects are people who don't quite know what they're doing, they're not full developers, so yeah. But a lot of the smaller projects are folks that they're a house flipper, they're getting into dividing lots for the first time. They don't know what they're doing,
right.
you know, they don't know what to expect, and so us being able to say, hey, these are the expectations that are gonna be required of you. Did you know, like, for example, you're gonna have to put in the fire hydrant? You know, having that up front is a great thing. Also, yeah, so that's exactly it. I mean, it's getting in front, especially for the folks that don't have a lot of sophistication associated, because they ultimately are the ones that end up taking the most of our time anyway, you know, where it's like,
Educating the novices.
educating the novices. We would rather do it upfront when they're excited about the project than when they found out something that's gonna cost them a whole bunch of money and we're coming in
Just to
afterwards.
play that out for 2 seconds, if for any of your examples, what's the cost incurred? Like, what's your permit, like, what's the application fee for that? Like, part repartition or lot line adjustment or whatnot, I mean, are they out pretty, I mean, they're gonna be out some money, obviously they have to do the improvements, which are that much more.
Right, so, I don't want, I wanna
You
say,
don't-
I wanna say a partition is something like $635,
Sorry.
it's not a ton of money.
Okay,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like I mean, if we're talking SDCPs, we're coming in at the end and saying, by the way, you have a system development charge cost. That's a lot of money that no one was expecting.
Right.
So $635, the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot compared to an SDC or a right of way improvement. Like a right of way improvement, you're essentially you know, potentially you're widening the road. Putting in the sidewalk, putting in the curb, and the engineering associated with it, that's a very large cost.
so presumably, yeah, the nominal fee that city council will set. Will get all the information out to the applicant before they get down a path where they're like, oh, actually, this is not viable sort of financially or.
Right.
And they've already.
So-
Yeah.
The thing that I think, and I mean, I think I've said it to you folks before. The planning phase of a project is probably the cheapest phase of the project, right? And as you go along, it gets progressively more expensive. So that's why rather than letting a project get to progressively more expensive, we're trying to address the issues, to make the issues upfront very clear before they progress far down that road.
Will this occur for someone building a single house, that kind of thing as well? I
Yeah.
see on here, if it's within a subdivision, and again, that's probably a developer that's doing that. but-
Right, so it says a lot within a subdivision that has been approved within the previous 5 years does not have to go through this process.
Right,
What we see on a lot of infill lots is they're extremely challenging to address this, just because if you look at our roads, all of our roads are a little bit different. All of this stuff along the roads, whether it has curbs, whether it has sidewalks, is a little bit different, so. So because of all of those complexities, it feels better just to say, yeah, if you're a single family house, yeah, go ahead and come in, we'll have this conversation.
I just had one comment. You know, you always post everything like in the Itemizer Observer and this one to the stateside and all that. I'm wondering, in the planning webpage.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, when we have a public hearing, can it be posted in the newsletter that goes out once a month to the public works? You know, those of us who use water and sewer.
So in the newsletter, and that's not a bad idea,
Because people might see that, whereas they might never come to the planning page on the website.
yeah, okay, yeah, I'll ask Emmanuel about. That. Right. I think that probably sounds. Just and so, you know, when we used to do the paper newsletter, we had sort of an ongoing. Planning. Thing, so what might make sense is just like a thing that essentially says ongoing or upcoming public hearings.
Yes.
And just trying to have that as a list. I'll just,
More people will probably see them.
yeah, no, it's a good idea.
If there's no more questions throughout this, I'm gonna go to the public testimony side of this. Correct, so we wish to hear from everyone who's interested in this proposal. Please limit your comments and questions to 3 minutes in length, and remember to state your name and address for the record. I don't think we have any comments on this piece, so. If there's no objection, then I'm gonna close the record and public hearing. And now we can deliberate some more. I think, feels pretty good to me where we landed, Chris. Try to commend you for taking our comments from the last meeting where we started talking about this, and I think the certainty piece of this is really, that's the goal here. And the transparency, so there's no surprises or, expensive costs incurred for, especially to your point of the developer with less experience. Needs the assist, and where staff is gonna spend a lot of time with education, so. Entertain, I don't give a sample of language, I think you do. Yeah, and I have it here too, if you want.
oh, nice job, Fred.
Good.
Alright, I have a motion. I move to board a recommendation of approval for LA 2025-03, a code change to require a pre-application conference for most development activities to the Independent City Council.
Second.
Did you give a second? Alright. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Alright, motion carries. And the city council can take on the rest.
Like the fees.
And the fees, yeah. Yeah. I don't have each other in front of me, but I think we have, no, all good. We have the second part of our business, which is discussion of draft provisions to the standards for mobile vending devices, which took me a moment to understand that was not vending machines. It's not much of food trucks. Yeah,
That's pretty funny.
I actually think that's confusing, and I think we should change the nomenclature.
So what would you call it?
What in parentheses?
Yeah,
Food trucks.
Yeah, it's just the, yeah,
Mobile food vehicles.
yeah. I don't-
So, okay, it's one of
It needs
the
to be
reasons,
your-
one of the reasons I didn't call it food trucks is, so, okay, so this is interesting, oh,
I would want it to reflect sort of lower, like somewhere else, somebody else's code,
okay.
whether that's like Department of Agriculture.
So
whoever.
one reason I didn't call it food trucks is there's a city in, it's a little town in Minnesota. And it's funny because Sean Irvine, who works here, and I both have cabins like 10 miles from this city, which is kind of random, right? Our families have cabins from this, like 10 miles from the city. Well, one of the lots in that city has what looks like food trucks, but they're not food trucks. They actually sell like used clothes out of them or something like that. And so that's it's more of a bizarre sort of thing. And so rather than talking about food trucks, mobile vending, I was trying to not do a food truck because I wanted it, if somebody had the idea like, I wanna do something out of my Airstream or whatever,
How about mobile retail?
mobile,
Vending,
mobile retail and food.
well, a retail device would cover what you're talking about.
I like the word device.
Vending kind of like you put coins in and you get something out,
Yeah.
what we kind of all imagine.
Okay, so I'm hearing what you're saying.
Just
I
words,
just think
it's just words.
Yes.
Okay, so
Take a
don't
word.
call don't call it mobile vending.
You can, as long as you really like define, or explicitly
Well, it
define.
does in what he said.
Yeah.
E.g. food trucks.
E.g. food trucks, there we go.
Yeah, food trucks
E.g.
Well, should we just-
and retail,
Non-permanent retail.
non-permanent retail. I like it. Alright.
Spitballing
I was
here.
like, yeah, no, let's even get a little more complicated.
Yeah. Sorry, you already done staff. You already done-
No, so I mean, just, so I mean, that's one of the. So we have standards related to this right now. We have, and it's called in our existing municipal code, mobile vending devices. Now. From this, and I mean, our last one, we wrote and we used it, we did it probably 5 years ago. What we have since found, and one of the reasons why we're proposing this, is we have. The way that it's written right now is the person with the food truck applies for that license. Which seems weird because then they're essentially trying to figure out the improvements to somebody else's property. Also, again, it's a lot of the times the person with the least interest in the property who's then making the improvements to the building. Also, a lot of times it's the sometimes there's language barriers to try and say you need a vacuum breaker for your hose. It's and stuff like that, just because it's just general stuff like that. And so what we think would be beneficial is to actually put the improvements on the party that's most responsible for the property, right? And so if you wanna put a mobile vending unit on your property, you apply, right? And you explain how the whole site works. A lot of times too, what we see too is people go in and they'll apply for one. And then somebody will say, oh, that actually works there, and then we'll get a second application for a different one. And then maybe a third application, and what we don't see is how these all work together. And so what we're trying to do with this code is to break out some of the stuff that specifically applies to the site. From the stuff that applies to the mobile vending device itself. That goal ultimately would make the permitting for the device much easier for the people who actually have the food truck and are trying to just plug it into a site. So our goal is essentially get a site permit ready that you could just plug in different devices over time.
So that's up to the owner of the site
Is
to do the improvements, but then they can just invite whatever.
Just like an out parcel pad ready.
yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
Because if that mobile vending device finishes its job or decides to quit, they're out whatever the money they spent to improve the site. But the person who owns the property still has the benefit of.
That's exactly right, and I mean, that's what we're seeing too, is we keep on seeing. We see units turn over on sites and then they're applying for almost the exact same thing, you know? So it's just, we've realized that the process actually doesn't work for us, as we wrote it up. We thought it made sense, but we realize now we see the limitations of it, so that's why we're wanting to permit sites. And then have a much simpler permit process for the actual food truck. That's our goal. So what you will see is there's two separate sections in front of you. There's 21, and I'm sorry that you don't have, we can go through it just little by little. And you can see it on the screen, so you'll see. This is essentially our existing code and how we're recommending it changed. We would incorporate this within the development code. The other section would be within the municipal code. So this would pertain specifically to the land use portions of the code. So you'll see it doesn't apply to the purpose is to regulate the locations of mobile vending devices, mobile food units. The subchapter doesn't apply to, you'll see that there. We have definitions, and then going down to standards specifically, you'll see this section that talks about specifically what zones they're not allowed in. They wouldn't be allowed in residential zones. B is sort of a controversial idea, and I'm more than willing to hear what you folks have to say. We are hearing from certain businesses in downtown that are brick and mortar restaurants, let's say, that they would love some sort of limitation on the number of food trucks in downtown. And so this just throws a number in there, 8, which is about what we have now. So I mean, we could talk about that before I go on too much.
I'm curious, I mean, I understand that other restaurants don't want competition, that's the bottom line. How many places do you think there could be other than what you already have? Are there other places that would be amenable to putting those kinds of mobile vending devices in?
Yeah, of course, I mean, there's absolutely lots that could accommodate them, so I mean, a couple of places that we've heard rumors of in the past, but folks never acted on, or we heard interest of in the past that people never acted on. It's a lot at Second and D, which is right across from the library. Couple actually looked at that to put in a mobile vending sort of pod on that site. Also, behind 7 Star Market, folks considered that site for quite a while. So I mean, that would be a potentially a fair number of units that could go into something like that.
I'm not sure we wanna regulate independent businesses and deny people those rights. I mean, you see, you also don't wanna have it so crowded, and you do have specifications in here about traffic. And that all makes sense, but I'm not a capitalist really, but I also don't feel like it's right to limit so much.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit outside the purview of. I feel like this is, I mean, if city council wants to maybe hash this out, then by all means, I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't feel quite right for us to be limiting that.
You know, if you've got 8 in here, why not 6, why not 10, you know? Where did they
I don't
come
wanna
from?
get, like, I don't necessarily wanna get into that
Yeah,
conversation, to be perfectly honest.
yeah, no, I mean, I kinda knew that you would say that.
I don't know what you're saying.
Oh, did I was second it?
I mean, okay, I'm more than happy to take it out, it's. Again, it was something that came from brick and mortar restaurants in downtown, so that's why it got put in.
In some ways, I would just flag that, I mean, if we develop a code and if we make a recommendation to council, if you could flag that.
Good.
For them to discuss or take on, but I don't think. Me speaking for myself.
Yeah.
I don't really wanna. Play that, I don't think it's, we should play that, but that's just one person's. Yeah, but 2 people's been. 3. Fair enough.
Okay, I think that's good, so let's keep on going, so see right there, talks about, specifically trying to. Have folks locate in paved parking lots or other hard surfaced areas. This,
What's a hard surface if it's not paved?
yeah, well, like paver block,
Oh,
you know.
gravel does not count?
I don't think gravel counts, I think specifically one of the reasons why we put hard surface was because we have had instances of people dumping stuff on the ground. So a hard surface like a parking lot is easier to clean than a gravel situation. That's why it originally got put in there, because especially we had just come out of somebody dumping stuff on it.
And by that, you probably mean the food truck people, not
Oh
the
yeah,
customers.
absolutely,
Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely. So use of public right of way, so. You will note in here that. What this would do is specify between a mobile vendor and, I'm sorry, wordsmithing, right? If you guys don't like.
Oh, no,
it,
we'll leave it, it's fine now.
no. But wordsmithing, so I called mobile vending pad sites and mobile vending pod sites. And I thought it was funny because they're kind of similar, right? And I thought it will be an easy way to remember it. So it's one versus multiple, right? And so there's different standards for the two. And so a pad, a pad, it's not allowed within public right of way or on other city property. A pod potentially could be, unless they demonstrate certain things, a pod potentially could be allowed, but it would have to be initiated by the city. Just sort of keeping it in there as a potential option, yeah.
So are you thinking, at one time you thought it would be neat, just east of Central to put in a vending or a mobile vending area
Yeah,
and a pod,
upon,
and that would be city approval, right? Is that what you're saying?
no, with this, it's specifically public right of way or city property.
Or
So I mean, right now, the city doesn't really have anything that. You would probably put pot of food trucks on. But if the city looked in the future and said, hey, you know what? And the place where I think maybe it makes sense is sort of along the river, a pod of food trucks along here makes good sense. Potentially, the city could initiate that application in the future, but.
This is only for public right of way or city property.
Yeah,
this-
that's what
yeah,
that's what
yeah.
he is specifically.
don't you have trucks by the fountain there sometimes with various different festivals. and-
Yeah, so that's we exempt out those when you look at
For the festivals
Mhm.
and then, yeah.
for festivals, yeah, specifically because we didn't want to get into. And we did that originally when we wrote this. So then there's just all sorts of standards related to clear travel ways. Making sure that a food truck's not obstructing travel lanes, pedestrian pathways, off-street parking areas, all that sort of stuff. That they had sufficient parking. That they address disposal of waste. That they, and then H is sort of an approach to utilities where it's looking at specifically. This would say, if you have a pod or multiple on a site, you have to put in utilities to each of the units. So essentially have a wastewater treatment pipe or connect to the wastewater treatment system. Have a grease trap, all of that sort of stuff, have a connection to water. Whereas the pads, the individual, you could have a standalone unit that's then pumped. It's what we're trying to do is create standards that are flexible for both, but essentially recognize that if you're putting a whole bunch of these on a site, put in utilities for it. And so that's what essentially this is saying.
Is the green grayed out area taken out?
No, the green grayed out area was something that I asked about upstairs and then I forgot to unhighlight,
Oh,
so I apologize for that. They, again, with that, I was encouraged to say. The council has the purview to system charges with that, so.
I mean, ultimately, we're not changing really any of the standards, we're just putting the onus on the property owner
Yeah,
to be input, to make sure that his tenants. So they are in compliance, excuse me, so that.
yeah, and it's trying to like just clarify things that we've sort of found out like
Okay.
through the process of this, you know, like. People can pump their tanks on a standalone. Unit, but again, if there's gonna. Essentially, it's the idea is if you're gonna have a pod, make it a pod, like actually
Formalize it.
formalize it, you know, let's see this work together, let's. That's the.
So Fred, I'm curious to know what conversations you've had with property owners about this. Is this going to come as a shock to some folks who just wanna have the use of their land use? Collect the rent on it without having to do all this.
You know, we haven't talked with folks at this point, this is sort of the first review of this, we have. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 sites. With this. And so, yeah, we'll probably have conversations with each of those property owners that this is coming. What we've sort of seen is even if individually. Somebody goes in and puts in a standalone tank by itself, what ends up happening is over time. It gets more formal. As it goes along. So I don't think anybody's gonna be surprised about. Utility connections or anything like that. Basic, yeah,
How much is the property owner involved in the current process?
I would say not.
So
Very much not, which is a very weird thing, right?
Yeah, that seems, I mean, I wasn't on the thing. But this came through.
This actually went just straight, because this got adopted into the municipal code, originally this never came to.
Okay, either way,
Yeah.
that does seem. Odd.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
might sign the application, but I mean, so a good example. When, I mean, I hate to get.
You don't have to give examples,
Yeah.
it's fine to not give examples, I'm just
So-
typically a property owner. Not being involved is sort of wild.
Yeah,
A little bit.
well, yeah, especially, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
That's fine, so I in that respect, I like this,
Yeah,
because then everybody's at least engaged, and again, just like our hearing. There's certainty, expectations that are communicated that all the parties are aware of, transparency from what's gonna be required, no surprises.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we're hoping to get to is it's like, hopefully we get to the point where it's like. We have a permitted site, a permitted location for mobile vending devices. It has these things in it, so everybody who's going into it is gonna connect to the water here. And they're gonna put it into the sewer right here, and yes, there's a grease trap there, or no, each individual unit has a grease trap on it. But that's what we're hoping to get to, and things like propane storage tanks. We know that all of the propane is gonna be
Right.
a certain distance from the property line and everything that's necessary for fire and like that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're hoping to get to with this. And so, yeah, things like lighting, I mean, signage, restroom facilities, all of those sorts of standards, we have stuff like that right now.
Yeah.
This sort of, it might tweak them a little bit. It might also like specifically divide them out for different standards for a pad versus a pod. So that's what all of this is intended to do. Like the signage. So I mean, why there's different signage standards for mobile vending pads versus pods, the reasoning for this is if you have one, you can put out a A-frame sign, you could have the signage on the unit, right? That's about all that you get according to this, I think. Sandwich board signs, and yeah, no feather flags or other signs prohibited in IDC, whatever, are allowed. So the second one, mobile vending pods, it's different because if you have a pod, we don't want all of the folks within the pod, say you had five, each put their 5 signs. So no, you then sign the pod itself, and then you could have each individual unit on the site have their A-frame signs, but not out on the sidewalk. So there's 5 A-frames. So that's why there's different signage standards for that. Things like restroom facilities, if you have a pod, have a bathroom, right? You know, otherwise, if you don't have a pod, make sure that you have access to a permanent restroom for employees, you know, and show us what that is. And so then there's the application and all that sort of stuff, and then the conditions. That's what that's essentially trying to do, and then mobile vending devices, the second one would actually go within the municipal code. This is on page 29, Myra. And this one would be just a much simpler process for the unit itself to then go through. Just explaining what type of merchandise you're gonna sell, how you conduct the business, including your mobile vending device, what's your operations plan, how are you gonna do wastewater and gray water to make sure that you're in conformance with the site that you're going to, all that sort of stuff. And so the standards for approval would be consistency with the approved mobile vending location. That it's transportable at all times. We don't want somebody putting a mobile vending unit on a site and then not having it be able to move if it. Minimization of offsite impacts and insurance if you're in the city, and then consistency with the fire code, consistency with the health standards. So pretty simple sets of standards for that. But yeah, basically that's what we're trying to do is go to a location approach and then a device approach. And we think that ultimately will be a way better way to do it.
Agreed.
Hopefully overcome some of the issues that we've had.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think you're on the right track.
So yeah, you can look at that more. What I'll do is, in the draft that comes back to you, or you can look at it, if you see anything else, let me know. The draft that comes back to you will remove that 8, and I will just sort of include a flag in there as something that the council might wanna discuss.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sounds good, yeah, I think that's it for that.
Okay.
What do you think of the approach of not specifically having it solely tailored to food trucks? I mean, is that okay?
I think that's broad, that's good.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I actually like your reasoning, probably now that I've thought about it a little bit more. So I'll reverse course.
Mobile vending devices has grown on me over the course of the conversation.
That's kind of what I meant to be honest.
Yeah,
That kind of makes,
I think it was the
I'm
third
all-
time Becky said it, I was like, okay, that sounds kind of good.
yeah, this makes sense now.
Well, I can see that people might wanna sell shirts or hats or, something like that too.
Grab a barber.
I just like
so
to
have a barber.
there is a lot of barber, right?
There's a guy,
Yeah.
one if it comes to you,
Yeah.
he basically cuts.
That would not be a pad or a pod, but
Right.
yeah, fair enough.
Right, yeah, but no, I mean,
Dog groomers who have little
Mobile,
homes or,
mobile, yeah,
yeah.
not permanent.
yeah. Non-permanent. Non-permanent vending device, right?
Those guys born into the nerd life.
Yeah, no, I think the more places that people can feel.
I just like the latitude of not having it.
Yeah, entrepreneurial.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
That's why also we're not touching the numbers. Yeah, the number, yeah. One more. We have any other discussion information items?
Yeah, I do have a video.
We already do.
Oh, yeah.
I can go after the video.
No, please.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I was gonna ask, is there a consideration? We have not a lot, a bunch of empty lots.
Yeah.
That there would be a break in the cost for infill construction. Inside the defined area of the city or whatever, it reduces sprawl.
Yeah.
We already have infrastructure in place, you don't have to extend sewer lines, water, that kind of stuff. And it benefits housing in the city. So would we consider having watch my quotes here, a deal if you're going to build on an infill lot?
I would say costs are probably, in any incentives or anything else, are probably a council.
No, I know.
Consideration.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying for this group to do it, but is that something that should be considered rather than having empty lots and maybe even tear downs? Does it make
Were you gonna
sense?
say
Does it make
something?
sense?
What were you gonna
I
say?
was trying to say that, the Habitat, you heard for a minute, the Habitat housing lot there. I asked the city manager if they could waive fees on that, just informally, and she shot it down another way. I mean, so where's the money gonna come from? And she wasn't open to discussion on that at all, and that was for Habitat. So, at least right now, I don't think there'd be any wiggle room on that.
Well, you got a chicken and egg. We're trying to develop
Right.
housing
Exactly.
and then we put roadblocks up where you can't build houses.
Yeah,
Or
no,
it makes it not inefficient, but doesn't pay for itself.
right,
I mean,
So-
there's a couple of places from listening today. So we got I think on one of these streets, one block between 6th and 7th, the road isn't paved, isn't wide enough, it doesn't have a curb, doesn't have sidewalks. So if you were to build one house in the middle, I'm listening to you, you'd have to pave and put sidewalks the whole length of the block.
That's on your lot.
So the street would be like this and then it'd go out for one block, one house.
That's correct.
that's that's part of the conversation that we're having with some of these.
I know.
No, I mean, that's exactly why we're having this conversation with things like our infill standards. We have all sorts of streets in town that have insufficient width according to our transportation system plan. Or no sidewalks, but they also have no traffic. So to what degree do we need a sidewalk on a street that has no traffic? So some of that stuff is just stuff that we're having a conversation about. I will say there are a number of cities that do offer things like breaks and SDCs for walkable urban areas. I know that, for instance, like Eugene has classifies certain districts or zones or whatever, and then gives them a break because they assume that in this area, your transportation impacts are gonna be less because you're in a walk or an area or whatever it can be. Our system development charges right now do not do that. So
Other cities' SDCs can be scaled also for square footage, so under a certain size, you pay like 25%. Or if you're over a certain size for square footage, and again, just creating the incentive and disincentive structure.
And I have one, as a newbie to the city, to be here. I'm gonna ask, what about Skeletor out here that's, I understand it's changed hands 4 or 5 times, and a new owner do we get involved in any way in what's gonna happen to that thing before it crumbles and falls down?
So it did change hands again, so planning commission doesn't have any review with Skeletor because it's a site design review. Site design review is my purview, but it is in the historic district. So it has to get historic preservation commission approval. So any sort of project will go through the historic preservation commission, and then it will require a site design review, which is a staff level review. So when I was here, I don't know, maybe it was during COVID, the last owner went through site design review, went through historic preservation. So we assume that the next property owner will go through that process as well.
It would only come to us for changes in use or sort of something like that.
It would also come
From a dump to a legitimate building?
It would also
Is that a
come-
change in use?
No, I mean,
It would also come to you.
you're being
as-
facetious, so I mean, it's rhetorical, so.
It would also come to you if the application got appealed.
Yeah.
If my decision got appealed,
Mm.
the appeal body for a staff level decision is you guys. Whereas the appeal body for your decision is the city council. So you would hear an appeal if somebody appealed my decision on Skeletor.
Thank you.
Video. It's gonna be a slightly longer one, I apologize, it's good though. It's real good.
They're hard to read, aren't they? They should be a different font or a different typeface.
Or black, or white on black.
Trying to do a screen. Show you all.
So we're not gonna play the whole thing, but. We'll turn on the sound.
So in 2021, right where I'm standing, a neighbor's camera caught the final moments of 36-year-old Ashlyn Maddox. And she was dropped off here by a medical ride-to-care service. 2 hours after that, she was back here circling the area disoriented right before she fell unconscious. And the high temperature that day was 116 degrees. And this is 9 degrees above the previous record.
We are talking an extremely dangerous heat wave. And the reason for that is the folks in the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia are not used to this type of heat.
And Ashlyn died of extreme heat exposure. She lost consciousness just 50 feet away from her air-conditioned home. But there's more to the story than extreme heat and heat-related illness. When Ashlyn died, she was found with a McDonald's bag and a drink that still had ice in it. That's a clue about the last moments of her life. And what she did during those moments actually tells us a lot about how to make our cities more livable as temperatures set record after record. So this is the route that Ashlyn would have walked to go get food at McDonald's. And you can tell that there's just a ton of asphalt, a lot of impermeable surfaces, a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. We don't know for sure what happened, but if she did walk to that McDonald's, she would have likely been walking for over an hour along a very busy, very hot section of highway with very little shade. At that time, it was around 116 degrees at the Portland airport. But in other parts of town without many trees, researcher Vivek Shondis recorded a much hotter air temperature of 124 degrees. We'll get into why that corridor was so much hotter than other places in the city, but first, a bit more about heat as the world warms. We can identify two categories of cities. First, the already hot places like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Miami.
These places that are already really hot and already sort of getting close to the limits of some of the ecosystems and people living there, we're shifting those temperatures hotter. And so people have to rely even more on things like air conditioning in order to make these places livable.
But how does the other category of more temperate places like Portland suddenly transform into one of the hottest places on Earth? The answer is a heat dome. Normally, our weather systems are pushed from west to east by the jet stream. But sometimes the jet stream develops large, wavy patterns or meanders, essentially trapping weather systems.
What happens when we get a heat wave is that we have one of these high pressure systems that basically stops moving. So it stops propagating towards the east and it becomes roughly stationary and just stays in one place. And if it's strong enough and stays in place for long enough, you can get these very extreme temperatures.
The trapped high pressure system acts like a lid, evaporating clouds and bringing clear skies. Normally, the moisture in the soil and plants moderates heat as it evaporates. But if the high pressure system stays stuck in place long enough, this moisture gets depleted and the sun's energy goes directly into heating the air and temperatures skyrocket.
The 2021 heat wave in the Pacific Northwest was one of the most extreme heat waves across the planet. There's a lot of scientific disagreement about this at the moment, but some estimates put it at an event that would, on average, happen once every 100,000 years. It broke the Canadian national record by 4.6 degrees Celsius. This was absurd.
Perhaps this is the number one enemy against type 2 diabetes. The video you are
There's growing evidence that climate change is slowing the jet stream and causing more meanders, like the one that caused the 2021 heat dome. What we do know is that we're seeing more hotter heat waves, especially where most of us live. Extreme heat is especially deadly in cities, and that's because of the urban heat island effect. And this is where our built infrastructure amplifies warming by around 2 to 5 degrees during the day and up to 22 degrees Fahrenheit at night. That means heat-trapping aspects of our cities more than double the current level of global warming, making heat waves even more deadly. Researcher Vivek Shondis has a fascinating perspective on heat, especially in cities. And this gives us insight into what's going wrong and how we can actually cool cities down.
Heat kills more people than any other natural hazard, many other natural hazards combined, in fact, where we modeled out the health-related costs associated to extreme heat across the metropolitan areas of the country, and we're finding that there's a 8 to 10-fold increase in the number of heat-related illnesses by 2040. That's at the kind of global scale. When we start getting into cities a little bit more, we start seeing these thermal anomalies, these differences in temperature between one neighborhood and another, one street and another.
Back in 2021, Vivek revealed the shocking temperature difference between a wealthy neighborhood and a much lower income area in Portland using a weather instrument he and his team designed.
Well, we found a temperature difference of about 25 degrees, which is the largest air temperature difference I had ever recorded in this city.
This is the intersection that recorded that 124 degree temperature. That was the hottest temperature recorded during last year's heat dome. There aren't a lot of trees here, so there's not a lot of shade in this neighborhood, and you got a lot of pavement. Let's actually compare this neighborhood to the coolest neighborhood. Here it is, the coolest neighborhood with an air temperature of 99 degrees. There's tons of trees in this neighborhood, and it's surrounded by forests.
So cities are doing all kinds of things to try to turn the temperatures down. You can do a lot of engineering and you'll eventually land on the fact that trees are probably your best solution. It really comes down to that.
It doesn't take a scientist to know that trees have a dramatic cooling effect, but the mechanics of how this works are pretty fascinating. First and most obvious is shade. Trees block solar radiation from reaching the ground, so heat isn't absorbed by sidewalks and roadways. Second is transpiration. This is where water is taken up by tree roots, eventually evaporating through the leaves. Energy used in this chemical reaction actually consumes heat energy that would otherwise raise air temperatures. Transpiration can reduce heat by up to 8 degrees Celsius. Back east of Portland, Ashlyn can be seen walking east on her neighbor's security camera in the direction of McDonald's. We'll never know for sure if she walked there to get the meal she was found with, but if she did, it would have been on this route. The lack of trees in this area pushed temperatures from an uncomfortable 99 degrees to somewhere closer to the 124 degrees Vivek recorded in a similar part of town. So, with the projections of increasing fatalities from heat in the future and the proven cooling effect of trees, I assume that cities across the US would be actively increasing tree cover, especially in vulnerable low-income communities.
Overall, we're seeing a consistent decline of trees in our cities. In a world that's continuing to heat up is a scary trend.
And Vivek and others found that the neighborhoods with the fewest trees are almost always lower-income neighborhoods and communities of color.
You would think that with a clear scientific evidence around the loss of tree canopy occurring in not only Portland, but around the country, that we would be bringing a lot more trees into those hot neighborhoods. We studied 33 cities across the United States where we had really defensible scientific data, and we were looking at, did trees get increase and did green space increase in those areas, or did we see a decline? And in the hottest cities and in the hottest neighborhoods, we found a consistent decline of tree canopy. Those are the places that are actually losing the most trees in the region.
They're losing trees.
They're losing trees in the hottest places.
We have all the information.
Yeah.
But we're just not, the US isn't getting it right. Are there any other cities outside of the US that we can look to as an example of how to do this right?
One place that I've been thinking about a lot is Medellin in Colombia, and that's one of these places where they have attempted to reorganize transportation networks, housing patterns in service to keeping the tree canopy intact. How is a city continuing to grow, but yet maintaining large portions of their tree canopy and keeping those old, large trees that provide all of these benefits in place?
As I've traveled the world, I've seen how we've become lost in...
So we invited Vivek, one of the world's leading authorities on urban heat, to go to Colombia to try to figure this out. The city claims that their Green Corridors program has cooled their average temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. But is that true? And if so, how did a city mostly known for drug cartels make this happen? Today, Medellin has transformed into a vibrant city now known globally for its innovative urban development, culture, and breathtaking landscapes. Part of the city's transformation has been their Green Corridors program, started in 2016 to address air pollution. The program connects green spaces in the city with tree-lined streets and shaded avenues, a strategy we mostly fail to implement in the US. All right, so we're here at City Hall, and behind me is a green wall. And this is one of the many innovations that the city of Medellin has implemented to help cool air temperatures and to improve air quality. Everywhere we went, we collected temperature data.
Can you see?
We drove all over the city, checking out their parks, transportation corridors, and creative greening of public spaces. Vivek's done this work all over the world to study urban heat, and he seemed immediately impressed.
I would walk to work in this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, this would be a great place to get around. What's really cool is they're able to integrate multimodal transportation with green space in the same street segment. Shaded bike lane, shaded walkway, and then fast bus and car route.
The oldest palm tree in Medellin. It's right here. Not a lot of shade, so understand why there aren't more of those here. As we moved throughout the city, it was clear that Medellin had invested a lot of time and money in their green corridors. But we wanted to see what this investment looked like in Medellin's poorest communities.
So I'm going to be really looking for green space, presence, absence in these lower income neighborhoods.
Wow.
Wow.
Look at this.
Totally different scene than what we had seen before.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different. In an area like this, what do you expect to see on the temperature gauge?
What I'm seeing around me is a lot of brick, a lot of cinder block, a lot of concrete and asphalt. And so what we'd see here is a built environment that essentially traps the heat and holds on to it. So this area is actually going to be in some ways much warmer than the lowland areas. The priority here is clearly housing, like people need places to live. And so green space becomes then in some ways a luxury.
But just on the other side of the bridge, the city has invested in revitalizing a green space. Squeezed between dense development was a terrace garden with maintained plants, trees, and shade.
It's a lot.
It's very cool.
It's cool. You feel it, right? It's like just that little drop. We're already in a valley. It's like the water, the trees, the breeze.
The breeze is very nice.
That's really nice.
Nearby, we visited another pocket park, and we began to understand that the city's greening every available space, even in dense, unplanned, low-income neighborhoods.
I just want to take a whole pano of this. I've never seen anything like this. Amazing. Amazing. I keep seeing more and more of these gardeners that are here actively working on this space. And I have not seen anything like this in a public space in a low-income neighborhood with this level of concerted effort in my life. It's really, really a phenomenal moment.
All right, so we can stop there. Yeah.
Did you show us the one about the trees in Detroit and the studies that have gone on with that? I saw a video, maybe I watched it at home. They had two neighborhoods, and one, it was like 10 years or maybe a little longer. They had planted trees, and they tracked the neighborhoods, not just temperature, but air quality, health, and all sorts of different things. And in the neighborhood that they planted the trees in, people's lives were more improved in terms of health, in terms of the temperature, in terms of air quality. So it was, I thought that was really very convincing art video.
Yeah, that's good. I did print out a map just so.
There we go. There we go.
So we could take a look at stuff. It's a bad map and I apologize. I used to know how to mess aerials up a little bit, but what I tried to do is just white out. Do contrast so we can see where trees are. And so I just think, I mean, I saw this video, I thought, you know, it's local, right? Cause I mean, you guys remember that Portland, I mean, or that heat dome that we had. That thing was so hot, I had never ever expected anything like that. That was wild, right? And so I guess when you look at this map, that a couple of things just really jump out to me is you have a couple of essentially bands of trees through the community, you know, so the Ash Creek, South Fork Ash Creek, the Willamette River. But when you look ultimately at our canopy, we do not have a significant canopy, I would say, at all. And so I just think it's something to think about, just as food for thought for you folks. You can see on this map, you know, just the little black dots are the darker dots that you see there, those are the trees, right? So again, just not a huge canopy to think about. So, I mean, just a couple of things that I would encourage us to do, and as we are able, is it'd be good to plant more trees, it seems to me.
I put 11 on my lot.
That's good. That is really good.
They're very crowded now. It's animals.
That's
I get upset when I see new housing developments, like where I live in further south. And people aren't planting trees. They don't understand that deciduous tree on the south side of your house makes such a difference during the summer.
Yeah.
And it loses its leaves in the winter, so you get the heat from the sun in the winter. And it just makes the whole atmosphere around the house better with trees. I don't really understand why people aren't planting houses that they would have, planting trees that they would have.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I know, I agree, I'm just.
It's
I'm just tossing it.
Are in your garden.
yeah, no, and I mean, I agree.
I love trees.
I think that there's, I mean, some people are scared of trees, with things like falling on their house and whatnot. I would say we don't have a whole, I mean, so there's that, we don't have a whole ton of, I would say, really big tree, even really big trees around, well, there's.
There are a few, like some of the sequoias that have gotten big.
Oh, yeah, no, there's a whole lot.
There's some terrifying new trees.
Yeah, there's, so, but I mean, that's what I would say is there's that, but then even the things like the ice storms and damage to trees and whatnot. And so, yeah,
There was a case in Portland recently where a family tried to take down a tree as a safety hazard.
yeah,
And they had to go through a whole process, the city denied them. Well, lo and behold, it actually did fall down and it damaged their home.
yeah,
So the city was found liable for denying.
Similarly, the tree fell down and there's a permitting process in Portland.
Yeah.
And the tree that fell, they were asked to pay for a permit, even
That's
though.
the one,
Yeah, the
yes.
tree fell down. Anyway, which is my favorite thing in the world. By far. This tree broke my house, and I have to pay for the privilege of it falling.
yeah,
There's a joke in there about, did anybody hear, or did it make a sound?
I was in a house one time that had a tree fall on it, so I mean, I definitely understand that.
You can trim your trees and you can
Right,
have them.
and you can think about where to plant them in such a way as to,
Alleviate that.
yeah, exactly.
And many years, but maybe not that nice to scratch it.
Well,
And
I planted it. I planted one of the trees I planted because I really like Oregon big leaf maples. right? So I planted that on the east side of the house. And it was maybe 10 feet high, and now it's got bigger. And my brother just laughed and said, well, by the time it's an issue, you'll be gone.
That's not short problem.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so anyways.
Good video for, good food for thought video.
Yeah, and I mean, I just think, yeah, the more that we can do with shade is probably a good idea.
The new developments typically have a tree lawn between the curb and the sidewalk, or is the sidewalk typically right against the curb?
Yeah, no,
That makes a big
we do have
difference.
so I mean, so that's a great question. We do have a planter strip and we do tend to require one tree for every 35 feet. The issue with that is our public works department really doesn't like trees in that space.
Yeah.
They just gave it trimmed to ours.
Is that right?
Well, 100 acres.
What's that? Was that the power company or?
No, it was the city. A couple weeks ago.
Oh.
My husband's like, you should call some on our trees. Oh, guys are here trimming them. They don't like
Proactive city.
Well, I think part of the issue is sidewalks get.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, there are different kinds of trees, and the city hasn't done a very good job about having, at least in the past, what sorts of trees should be planted in those strips. And Pacific Power actually has a whole booklet for homeowners about what kinds of trees, how big they get, where you should plant them. And
We should provide that.
we need to have.
We have a list of trees and I do know that the last public works operations person went through it, paired it with the Pacific Power. She knew trees very well, and so she made sure that.
Is that on the city's website?
It's on the city's website, I could find out.
Alright.
That, and I will say that, like, we have talked to Pacific Power and said, hey, could you give, cause they're willing to give trees because they're always cutting down trees for power line purposes. And so one of the things that we're at least kind of kicking around here is the idea of getting trees and how to distribute those to residents.
Yeah.
Community. So,
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, good. Good information.
Yeah, please. Please.
I move to adjourn.
Exactly.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Please.